Good morning. It's now Thursday, the 22nd of August, and we're at the special Concorde check-in area here at Heathrow's Terminal 4. Our passengers have already started to arrive, and very shortly this whole area will be busy as our passengers arrive for the BA001. From here, their Concorde experience begins. They go to the special fast-track immigration and security, and then on to the Concorde lounge. There they enjoy the special Concorde product while they wait for their flight, and the aircraft's parked just outside the lounge. Well, I've got to go and join the rest of my crew, and we'll start our pre-flight checks. I look forward to you joining me on the flight deck in just a short while. Today it's a nice day here at Heathrow. Temperature at the moment of 17 degrees Celsius. Quite nice clear skies, some cloud around. The forecast for later in the day is to get a bit more cloudy and probably a bit wet, but we'll have gone by then. The route weather is forecast to be pretty good, and as far as our arrival in New York is concerned, they're forecasting a hot and humid day with some hazy skies, some little low cloud around. But when we get a bit nearer, we'll get a better picture of that. What we can say at the moment is that it's well within the limits within which we can operate. Checks are being done on the aircraft at the moment. Roger's been round his walk-round check, and the refuelling has been completed. He's just completing that paperwork. Les has been completing the paperwork to work out our performance figures for departure. And I'm just about to start my scan check. We all do our own individual scan checks, and basically what we're doing is covering the basic instruments, checking their serviceability, and setting them up for our departure. Les will be doing the same on his side, and Roger, of course, will be covering the whole of the engineers panel, as well as several other areas, in checking his scan check as well. As part of the scan check, of course, one of the things that needs to be done is feeding the information into the inertial navigation systems. The INS has been switched on, all three systems are up and running now, and the gyroscopes are aligning and getting accurate. Now we have to tell the inertial navigation systems where we're going, and then it'll call out of its memory the track distances and waypoints that we're going to fly, and providing we keep the information updated, it'll give us very accurate navigation information and present us with the approach at Kennedy Airport with an accuracy of about 200 or 300 yards or so. So I'm going to get on with that now. Very shortly the passengers will be getting on board, and we're planning an on-schedule departure at 10:30. Having done the first part of the scan check, I've now come to the inertial navigation systems. And because I'm flying the aircraft, so the number one autopilot navigation systems are controlling the aircraft, then I feed the information in on the number one side. But because we don't want to have to bother with putting all the information in separately on all the machines, we have the facility to remote feed the other machines from mine. So I'm going to press a button on all three that allows us to do that. And that means that whatever I put in on my machine will actually be fed into the others as well. And then they will obviously monitor and check that I put the right numbers and figures in. First thing I do is check with the position in the book of where we are. So you don't tell an inertial navigation system where you are to begin with, then it can't tell you where you're going to be and where you are when you move around. So checking where we are in the book position is correct. That was fed in by our engineers who prepared the aircraft for us before we arrived. The correct lat and long is in there, so the inertial navigation platform thinks we're in the right place. We then take the waypoints, the reporting points off our route, off the communications log that I have in front of me, and we feed those in. The first one we feed in is fed in manually, and I actually literally press the buttons to feed in the lat and longitude. So it's northerly 51272, check that's in, inserted into the memory of the INS computer, and the next it's westerly 527, that's correct, insert that. Now the computer knows the first place we want to go to, it can actually now start to recognise the route we want to go on from its own memory. So the next thing I do is, by pressing one or two buttons, is actually to bring out of its memory the rest of that route. It knows where we are, it knows where the first point is, providing I now give it a route as well, by giving it a route number, then it will bring out the rest of the route from its memory and feed it into all the inertial navigation computers. We also have the facility to update from ground-based VHF stations our INS positions, and that improves our accuracy quite considerably. And so I'll give it a program of those to recognise later on, and I'll show you how that works when we're en route. And again, out of its memory by putting another number in, it'll now bring out the recorded lat and longitudes of those ground stations, and later on we can use those, as I say, to improve its accuracy. So remove it from that. The next thing for me to do now, as the other two are going to do very shortly, is to go down and check those positions all the while. The waypoint selector is this knurled wheel here, and it's selected at number one, waypoint number one. It's the one I fed in manually, and it's correct. And I just move down, dialing over 1, 2, 3, down to a maximum of 9, and checking the lat and longitudes off my communications form. And then I check the distances are correct as well. So the information I have written down, which is obviously very carefully measured, corresponds with what the inertial navigation computer has brought out of its memory. Having done that, I'll move on to complete the rest of my scan check. Well, all three of us have completed our scan checks now, and Roger's completed the engineering preparation. We're just waiting for the tech log, the official document that hands over the aircraft from the engineers to the flight crew, to the captain, to be completed, and that'll be offered to me to sign in just a short while. We've just got a few minutes to tell you what else is going on at the moment. The passengers have started aboard. The lounge is just out in front of us. It's a relatively short walk for them to get down to the aircraft. And of course, they're up there in the lounge in a considerable amount of comfort and enjoying the facilities of the Concorde lounge. And then we get them down onto the aircraft, which is also air conditioned, of course. It's quite a warm day. And they'll be getting ready for our departure as well. Les has already spoken to air traffic control a short while ago. We have a need to call them about half an hour before we're ready to go, just to warn them that we are planning to go on time, so they can set up the Atlantic clearance for us with the oceanic controllers, and that call was made a short while ago. We've also got the information that tells us what's happening on the airfield, so now we can plan with some certainty the departure we're going to use, and I thought I'd just show you the chart we're going to use and the route we're going to take. Obviously, if you can see that the two parallel runways here at Heathrow are the two main runways at Heathrow. We're going to take off on the southerly of the two westerly facing runways, runway 27 left. And just after departure we'll make a gentle turn to establish on a radial 260 out of Heathrow Airport. When we get to 7 miles DME from Heathrow Airport, then we make a right turn to establish on the 273 QDM inbound to a medium frequency beacon, Woodley NDB, just near to Reading. And then we pass over that beacon and head off in the direction of Compton, which is in North Berkshire. It's very likely that somewhere in this area air traffic control will pick us up on radar and actually give us headings to steer rather than actually follow this track. And that's so that they can fit our departing route in with any arrival traffic they've got and any overflying traffic. So while this is our plan at this stage, we'll almost certainly fly the first part of it, but at some stage, probably around Woodley, we'll be given headings to go elsewhere. So we're going to fly from Heathrow, climbing up to 28,000 feet, which is our optimum subsonic cruising speed at heavy weights, and limiting our speed to a Mach number of 0.95, just 95% of the speed of sound. And at that height and speed, we're still already 100 miles an hour or so quicker than ordinary subsonic aeroplanes. We'll then maintain that height and that speed until we get out over the Bristol Channel. We'll pass over the city of Bristol. The north coast of Somerset and Devon will be on our left-hand side, the south coast of Wales on our right-hand side. And as the Bristol Channel opens and widens, then we get to the point where we can start our supersonic climb and acceleration. When we get to that point, of course, we'll go through that in more detail and show you the procedures we operate. So initially, as we climb out of Heathrow, we latch onto a speed of 250 knots soon after takeoff, which is our best noise abatement speed. We then increase our speed when we no longer need to fly at that speed for optimum noise abatement, up to a cruising speed of VMO, which today will be something like 397 knots. And then as the Mach number starts to take over from that, we'll limit our speed to 0.93 and then 0.95. So it's a progressive climb and increasing speed all the while until we settle into our subsonic cruise, 28,000 feet, and a Mach number of 0.95. The departure we're going to do is, as I said, from runway 27 left. It's actually very close to where we are. It's just a few hundred yards away on my right-hand side. So it's going to be a very short taxi. And most of the aircraft will be departing from the other side of the runway, because the main part of Heathrow is actually on the other side of the runway. Terminal 4, mostly used by us, of course, here at Heathrow, is on this south side. So there'll be very little taxi traffic in front of us, but probably quite a bit of traffic coming from the other side of the airfield. But quite a short taxi, and as I say, departure off towards the west. Now, of course, the other thing you'll see during the departure is the handling of the throttles. I'll talk as we go through that procedure, but what we're going to do is to move the throttles fully forward for departure, and Roger will have pre-engaged the afterburners, which will light up as we do that. Then there will be calls for noise abatement, 3, 2, 1 noise you'll hear, and when that happens, Roger will switch off the afterburners and throttle back the engines to a predetermined engine setting to give us good climb performance, but to make us as quiet as we can be for the local community. And then today, a little later on, after we've applied 2 more percent to aid our climb when we get a little bit higher, we'll gradually increase our power back again to our normal dry power. Now, dry power is what we call the power setting when we have the throttles fully forward, but no afterburners engaged. So full dry power is the throttles fully forward and no afterburners engaged. And at that stage, then, the next time the throttles will come back as we slow down again to settle at our cruising altitude of 28,000 feet. So the procedures for departure are going on all the while. I'll turn back and get on with a bit more of the paperwork at the moment. I'll talk to you again a little later. Okay, so more of the inevitable paperwork's being completed, and we got to the point now where we can come together and start reading from the checklist to bring ourselves towards the non-scheduled departure. I'll ask Les to start reading from the checklist.
Okay, Master CBs.
They are set and checked, and I have no flags in the middle.
No flags.
Cockpit preparation security.
Check.
Complete.
One's complete.
And complete.
Oxygen.
On checked and 100%.
Check
Check 100% here. DB windows.
Port.
Starboard's closed. Flight control inverters. They're on. Anti-stall systems. They're on. Rad INS switches.
Radio.
Radio. Instrument transfer switches.
Set.
Set. Altimeters. Last we had was 1013.
1013, 8680, 20 feet and normal set.
Set.
Checked and set. Nav radios.
We've got London on both with 260 in the QDM. We've got Woodley on both NDVs.
Yeah, they're all
Set.
identified. Brakes, park.
They're still working on the
We're
wheels.
waiting for the engineers to finish,
AFA.
aren't we? Nav lights.
They're off.
Throttle masters.
They are main.
Ground hard checkup.
Yellow, yellow and off.
Fuel heaters.
Auto.
Engine recirc valves.
Shut.
Secondary air doors.
Selected auto, Dave.
Checked.
Batteries.
On.
The INSs.
Okay, all ready?
All set.
Yep,
Press
go ahead.
position from the book. North 51276, west 266.
Check.
Checked.
Checked.
Waypoint 1, checking the first four. Is Woodley, north 51272, west 000527.
Check.
Checked.
Number 2 is Compton, north 51295, west 001131.
Check.
That's checked.
3 is Molby, north 51355, west 2036.
Check again.
And number 4, the Axel Point, north 51240, 3 degrees and 50 west.
That's all checked.
All checked,
Down to 0. Ready for nav.
ready for now.
Nav on 1, 2, 3,
Nav
and the ready
mode.
nav lights are out.
Loading check, nav mode mix.
Loading check. Nav
0.
mode mix here as well.
Loading check. Nav mode mix.
Looking at the airside bugs, pitch indices.
Right, I have 165 set twice. 193, 214, 250, 254, and 13 degrees, which cross checks.
They're
Checked.
set. Fuel flow P7 bugs.
Do you agree with these, Roger?
Yep, that's fine.
204 and 200. Back there, 391, 385.
Agreed.
That cross checks.
Okay, clock TLA bugs.
82 seconds, which is 122.
Yep.
Set on both sides, cross check.
And I've set 15 and a half.
2.5 degree check.
Right. Briefings next.
Okay, it's 27 left. Standard left-hand seat departure. As per the SID, which we're all very familiar with, it's turn left onto 260, which is set him on there. We climb into 6,000 feet. We've got to cross Woodley at 4,000 feet or above. Safety height within 25 miles is 2,300 feet. And before top of climb is 3,300 feet. So we'll use 3,300 feet.
Understood.
We'll stop for the usual emergency items that we would stop for. Come to rest on the runway. Make sure we monitor everybody and do the correct drills. We'll stop, ascertain what's gone wrong, sort out the situation, agree a diagnosis and actions before we get any pressure on us to
Right.
taxi off the runway. If we're happy, we'll taxi off. If not, we'll call for assistance.
Okay.
If
Understood.
we have an emergency after V1, and it's to do with the engines, I'll try and remember, I'm sure you'll give me a contingency power. We'll rotate in the normal way. If you can monitor my flying, which is the most important thing, then if we have a problem, let's agree the diagnosis between us again. I'll call for the checklist, you two do it, I'll do the flying.
Right.
Okay, I will take over the radio from you at that stage as well.
Okay.
And obviously if it needs an immediate return, we'll turn left. If we've got time, we'll fly away. If we have to dump fuel, we'll come back. Okay? 6,000 feet, as I've said, and just remind you again, 3,300 feet for the safety line.
Fine.
We have one more passenger to come and then we've got everybody.
Thank you very much, Roger.
Okay, we're waiting for the load sheet. I'll listen out for that. And we've still got the brakes to sort out with the engineers,
AFA.
so we're up to that stage now.
Thank you. So that's brought us down to what we call the dotted line. It is actually a dotted line in the checklist, beyond which we can't go until we've got our very latest information on the load sheet. That will come out of the computers in the building. Our dispatch officer is now will be finally doing that at the moment, putting the final figures in. They'll be with us any moment now. One slightly unusual thing at the moment is that the brakes, as you've probably heard, we can't set them to park at the moment, which obviously is where we need them before we start the engines. And that's because our ground engineers are actually changing one of the wheels. In towing the aircraft across, obviously one of the tyres has got a little bit scuffed, and in Roger's internal inspection, he's made the decision to have that tyre changed, and the ground engineers are doing it. That'll just take them a couple more minutes, and it's anticipated it shouldn't cause a problem with our departure. So we're now just waiting for the final bit of computerised paperwork. In the meantime, I'm going to have a word with the passengers. So we've just had the load sheet presented to us, the computer printout of the weight and fuel distribution on the aircraft. I've just checked that and signed it. It's a legal document that requires the captain's signature, of course. The engineers report that the wheel change is nearly complete, Scheduled departure time is approaching, all the passengers are on board, so things are coming together now for an on-time departure. Traffic control have given us our clearance and actually have suggested to us there may be a slight delay in our departure as far as they're concerned, and in fact we may have to wait just a little bit of time, only maybe 5 minutes at the end of the runway. So we're going to get on with our normal procedures. You'll be able to watch us go through these, and wherever I can I'll be talking you through what we're doing and explaining the processes that we're going through. Engineers have just reported the wheel's been changed and that's complete, so the brakes are back on. We're just really waiting for the final door to be closed and we can get on our way. And when we get our clearance, Roger will be starting up the first 2 of our 4 Rolls-Royce engines, and while he does that, Les will be doing some checks from his side, and I will also be doing some checks from mine. And predominantly what I'll be checking are the flying controls, checking the hydraulic and electric feeds to the flying controls, going through a whole system of checks before we get on our way. I'll be doing that while Roger's starting the engine, so it's happening while we're pushing back and before we start our taxi out. You better follow us through all of these, and they'll start in just a few seconds' time.
Ready to continue with the checklist?
Load sheet.
It is checked.
Checked.
0 fuel weight, 0 fuel CG.
87.7, 52.08.
Checks.
Fuel remaining aircraft weight.
94.400, 182, 150.
Check. Load limit.
Checks.
They are set for a burn-off.
Takeoff data's correct. Start clearance we've got. Door line.
All out.
Master warning.
Recall 4-4 on those 2. Checked.
Engine collision line.
On.
Throttles.
Idle.
Engine B pump.
They are on.
Okay, down to you, Roger, for clearance to start.
Hello, ground.
Hello?
We're ready to start if you can give us the pressure and the clearance.
Okay, coming up.
Forward a little.
Air on 2.
Thank you very much indeed.
Air on 3.
Lovely. Well, we'll take number 3 first. Ready to start 3.
All clear.
Selecting 3 now. We check to make sure that the engine start valve opens, and then we go to the front of the aircraft to check that we have a rotation on the engine. When we get to 12%, we open the HP valve to allow the fuel to go in, checking that we have a red light on the shutdown handle and that we also have a start light on. The ignition light also comes on and we have light up, which we require within 8 seconds. At 25%, the start valve closes and I make a selection on our debo switch to allow the engine to accelerate to our normal idle. We make sure that it goes through the rotating stall, which will involve it in going to 70% and then coming back slightly. We then check the systems for that engine are all operational. We're finished with the air on the right-hand side, ground.
Thank you.
Ready for the hydraulics, Dave?
Yeah, go ahead.
Selecting the hydraulics now.
Thank you.
We're ready to start number 2, ground.
Okay, clear, sir.
Number 2. Finish with the ground air.
Thank you.
Okay, number 3, number 2 engine.
They are running.
Hydraulic.
It is checked.
Hello, ground. Just make sure the ground equipment's clear. We're clear to push back when you're ready to call for brake release.
Okay, thank you. Right, flight track, parking brake, test release.
Okay, brakes release at 0936.
Thank you.
Okay for the visor. Visor going down.
very much. Number 4.
Okay.
Number 1, ground.
Okay. Flight deck, parking brake set to park.
Stand by. And brake set to park.
Thank you.
Okay, number 4, number 1 engine.
They are running.
Pushback checklist complete. Nose wheel steering.
On, off.
On. Check this side. Flight controls, air system trim. It's all checked now. Cabin filled, all engaged. Engine and tight engine schedule.
It is off. We are flying over.
Brake bands.
On.
Idle switches.
Low.
Door warning.
Tested and off.
Engine P-pump.
They are all on.
Hydraulics.
Checks.
Electric.
Checked. Ground bypass.
Hello ground, just make sure the ground equipment's clear. We'll look for you on the left hand side, thanks for your help.
Okay, have a nice trip, bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye. And that's the after start checklist complete.
Thank you. So having started all 4 engines with pushback, we're now sitting in the middle of the Victor cul-de-sac, just outside Terminal 4. Les has been reading the completion of the checklist. That's the end of the stage at which he reads them. From now onwards, Roger will be reading the checklist. And we've just spoken to our man on the ground, who's been attached to us by intercom, and he's walking out onto the left-hand side, checking the area around the aircraft completely free of any obstacles, no vehicles around. And then he'll give me the signal to say that it's clear as far as he's concerned for us to taxi, and we just await our air traffic control clearance.
Ground, Speedbird Concord 1, request taxi
Seen the pin?
clearance.
Speedbird 1, right turn for 27 left.
Right, 27 left, Speedbird 1.
That's the taxi clearance that we anticipated, just out at the end of the cul-de-sac, turn right, a very short taxi to 27 left. We've just now got the visor down, the nose still at its 0 position, and we're now going to lower the nose to 5 degrees. Thank you, Les.
It's fine.
Well, taxiing. First thing I do then is check the brakes work properly before we go anywhere.
Clear to starboard.
And clear on my side, clear on Les's side, and we move forward and taxi.
The master warning was the number 3 air group. I've isolated it. We'll try it in the air.
Thank you.
We're all strapped in, sir. All checks are correct. Passes fully briefed. Doors and automatic.
Thank you.
The voice in the background there was our cabin service director, Russell Bairstow, just reporting that everything's secure in the cabin, all the crew and passengers have been briefed. So as far as he's concerned, the cabin is now secure for takeoff. That's a vital part of the pre-departure preparations as far as we're concerned. I'm now going to ask Roger to read the taxi checklist. Thanks, Roger.
Visor and nose.
Down 5 degrees.
Brakes.
Checked and normal.
Flight instruments.
Okay, looking at 027.
And 27028.
By 021.
Checks.
Cross checks, no
Check, no
flags.
flags.
Flight controls EFC.
Are all in blue and the light is out.
Trims.
I've set and checked.
2.5. Set for takeoff.
Set for takeoff.
On frequency, verified, Denmark. Okay, first left, first right, southbound to kilo 16. Speedbird 1, monitor, 118.5, bye-bye.
118.5, Speedbird 1, bye-bye.
So as we taxi out, I can see that there's one aircraft on the runway about to depart. There's one of our British Airways 767s ahead of us about to taxi on after he's gone, so it looks like there's nobody else around at the moment to stop us getting away quite quickly, other than the fact that air traffic control may have a slight delay down the line, further down our route, before we actually get out across the ocean. It may just hold us back for a few moments, although I think the time is approaching when that delay won't be a factor.
Concorde 1, hello after the company 76 depart, line up 27 left. If you're rolling the right 3 minutes.
Reverse air shut-off check.
Go ahead.
Mid-travel forward. Idle. Idle reverse. And cancel. Seats and harness next.
Nice, lock power secure.
Lock powerful secure. So as the checks progress and we get nearer to the runway, we've just been told to line up after the 767 departs, so we should be going in just a couple of minutes' time or so. The check we just completed with the throttles is to ensure that the bucket system was working correctly, the sequencing was correct. And that's a check we do before every departure. The whirring sound you can hear in the background is Roger moving his seat. All our 3 seats here are electrically controlled. And because with the attitude at which the aircraft flies, it might be very difficult for us to move them manually.
Takeoff CG switch.
Should be normal, looks like it is, 53.5%.
It is normal. That checks.
53.5 seats.
The taxi checklist is then complete.
So the 767 just departed, and we're moving forward into our position on the runway 27 left. Quite a nice day here today, quite good skies really, with some light cumulus cloud around. Looking ahead to our departure route, there's a bit of cloud out there, but nothing that should cause us any problems. Before takeoff check please, Roger.
Briefing takeoff data.
No change to the briefing. The data's the same, 6,000 feet, 3,300 is the safety height.
Double check.
Checks landing lights.
Taxi turns on, the rest all off.
Transponder.
Sorry, Roger.
Transponder.
Transponder is set.
1012 I heard him say.
Yeah, 1012, cross check.
Checks both sides. Wheel lights.
Off.
Off.
Master warning.
Record, there's nothing there, inhibited.
Takeoff monitor.
Armed.
Reheat. Selected.
Concorde 1,
Alright.
takeoff 27 left, 240 at 10 knots.
Takeoff, Speedbird 1.
Pitch index.
13, cross check.
13% cross check.
Radar.
No, thank you. So
The before takeoff check is
just
complete.
been given our takeoff clearance. The reheats are primed, ready to switch in automatically when we open the throttles, and the wind's a bit from our left at about 10 knots. All set?
What's that?
Brakes released. 3, 2, 1, now.
Speedbird 1 rolling.
BQ210 at 10.
Airspeed building.
Jordanian 112, hello, continue for the hold 27 left, then hold on the left-hand side.
100 knots.
Power set.
P1. Rotate. P2. Positive climb.
Gear up, please.
Gear.
Jordanian 112 is fine, continue straight ahead after British Midland 737 report, line up 27 left. LS43, continue in Victor 14. Victor 14, fairway left, right,
3, 2, 1, noise.
Yes, takeoff check, please.
Roger. Landing gear.
Flights off neutral.
Landing lights.
Concorde 1, London 12907, good day.
12907, Speedbird 1, bye-bye. Landing lights, taxi turns are on, the rest are off. London, good morning, Speedbird Concorde 1, climb confidence 6,000 feet.
Speedbird 1, Roger. Score point out, no speed restriction, climb altitude 6,000.
Ident, no speed restriction, climbing 6,000. 6,000 feet, speedbird 1. 6,000, check.
Check. Master warning.
13475, good day.
Has been recalled.
So here we are climbing at 250 knots now, and we're just to the south of Windsor, just come to the south of Windsor. 7 miles, 2 more percent, please, Roger.
Coming.
It's a little bit lumpy in the air today. There's quite a bit of thermal activity, probably quite good for gliding today, I would have thought. We just reached 7 miles from London on that 260 radial, turning right now to 273 inbound towards Woodley. Roger's added 2 more percent to the power, which gives us a little bit more performance. Meets our height restriction. Traffic controller just cleared up flight level 90. He said no speed restriction, which meant that we can accelerate beyond our normal terminal control speed up to our required en route climb speed.
Put comms on your side, Dave.
Yes, please. And we've got a minute and a bit to go. That's good for height and time. Nose and visor can come to. So we're now going to select the nose and visor up as we've gone above 250 knots and we're slowly increasing speed. And Les is now going to make the selection.
Nose going to 0.
The nose is now at 0, but the visor's still down. Now he selects the visor to come up. This is going to streamline the aircraft and also make it considerably quieter up here on the flight deck. You've probably noticed already that we're using our intercom at all times. That's because the flight deck of Concorde is actually quite noisy, especially with the nose and visor down. It's quite reasonable in the cabin, of course, but because we're right at the pointed end here, we actually do get quite a lot of wind.
The after takeoff check complete.
Thank you. Right, just coming up towards Woodley. We've got to be at Woodley at 4,000 feet or above, which we're going to be. And after Woodley we'll make it.
Heading 285.
285 degrees, speedbird 1.
In fact, I was interrupted by traffic control. They have actually given us a radar heading as I anticipated. Brownlands are heading at 285, and they'll now start giving us headings to feed us out towards the west, towards our XL point.
Air master warning.
And that's the number 3 air group. I've just retried. I'll leave it off for the time being.
What you heard there was one of our master warnings coming up, the gong, and we saw a red light come up. That's to indicate, I'm sorry, an amber light come up, which is to indicate Roger needs to just give a little bit of attention to one part of his panel. It's not a major problem in any way. Quite normal actually on quite a warm day.
Climb flight level 130.
Climb flight level 130, speedbird 1.
Traffic controller giving us further climb now to flight level 130. 13,000 feet, that checks.
1013, set my side, have all the heights now. Check.
That checks.
Up MSA.
Yeah. feet, then 99% please, Roger.
Coming up.
So we're slowly increasing speed all the while. We're coming up through 305 knots at the moment, balancing the increase in speed with continuous climb, obviously to make sure that we meet our height restrictions and actually get away from the surface. One of the reasons, of course, is that as we get higher, we can put more power back on again. And we've just gone through 6,000 feet, and Roger's put the power setting up to 99% N2. When we come through 7,000 feet, he'll put it up to 101%. And through 8,000 feet, we'll put it up to full dry power. That's full power without the afterburners. 7,000 feet, 101, please.
Coming.
And obviously, of course, as the power comes on, that increases the potential we've got for climbing and accelerating as well. At the moment, we're still clear to 13,000 feet. We're still on a radar heading of 285.
Bird 1, turn left, head 265.
265 degrees.
And he must have been listening to me because this is now giving us a turn left on heading of 265. We're up above a layer of cumulus cloud. There's nothing very thick about it at the moment. At the moment I'm still hand flying the aircraft. What I'm going to do in a moment is engage the flight director. That still leaves me to hand fly the aeroplane, but actually the instrument in front of me gives indications of where the automatics think I should be going in order to comply with the flight regime we're in. And it's a device which you can follow very carefully and also monitors our hand flying as well. So it's a belt and braces device.
13475, Seabird 1, bye-bye.
Just been given a frequency change to another controller now, still London, but now with the controllers that work greater distances away from Heathrow. My throttle, thank you, Roger.
Understood.
160 to
160
window.
scene.
16 is checked and the climb rating is selected. 0.7.
Cool. 0.7 check.
Altimeters.
Looking at 95, climbing 160. Going through 100.
checks.
713 is set, and 53.3.
It is just starting aft.
So now we've just been cleared up to 16,000 feet, going to 11,000 feet at the moment, flying at VMO, the maximum indicator speed we can fly at.
Yeah.
And in the business you may have heard our TCAS just say to us, electronic voice says traffic, which is telling us that on our radar there's another aircraft in the vicinity, but not a threat to us at all, but just to warn us that it's there.
How do you feel about a seatbelt sign, Dave?
Yeah, that can go, thank you.
Going off now. Taxi turn lights.
They're off now.
Climb checklist is complete. The fuel is going aft.
With the Concord 1, climb flight level 230.
Climb level 230, Lever 1. 230.
We've just been cleared by traffic control now to flight level 230, 23,000 feet.
That checks.
Which is a continuous climb now for us, and just in a while I anticipate they'll give us the further climb up to 28,000 feet, which is where we want to level off until we're out over the Bristol Channel. They're still giving us headings to steer. My flight director is now engaged, giving me a indication which I can monitor to make sure that I'm doing and complying with what the automatic sticker should be doing. And just as we settle down, I'm going to put the autopilot in, so I have a bit more freedom to talk to you and tell you what we're doing. Nicely settled stable now in a high-speed climb coming up through 17,000 feet. My number one autopilot is now being engaged. I'm actually telling it through the computer now that I wanted to fly this computed speed on this heading that air traffic control have given us, and I've switched the autothrottles in to the standby mode so that when we come to level out they'll switch themselves in and maintain our speed that we're planning to cruise at. It's been told to turn right on a heading of 280 degrees. And very shortly I anticipate they'll tell us to fly direct from our position to our acceleration point in the middle of the Bristol Channel. That's already fed into our inertial navigation computer. And once they do tell us that, then I'll tell the computer to tell the autopilot to actually take us to that place. Even though the autopilot is engaged, you've got to very carefully monitor what it's doing, because again, if you tell it to do something silly, it'll do something silly. So you've got to make sure that you tell it the right information and that it's doing then what you want it to do. Despite the rumours about autopilots, they're not something you can actually take your attention away from and just allow to do what they like with the aeroplane.
Altimeter check.
20,000 or 230 with a prime, and it's 54.7.
Affirmative, it's still going aft.
The passengers have now been released from their seats. The seatbelt sign has been released so they can get up and move around. The cabin crew have already started their cabin service. There'll be drinks and canapes going round in just a short while. And we're settling into the initial part of our flight now, approaching our subsonic cruising level, and we'll be settling at Mach number of 0.95 in just a short while. At the moment it's 21,500 feet, 21,500, Mach number of 0.88, and increasing all the time, and our traffic control has cleared us to 27,000 feet, that checks. So we have a few minutes before the next stage of the flight. What I'm going to do is put the blind up over my left shoulder, because the sun is out over my left shoulder, it's quite high, and as we accelerate away across the Atlantic, we're going to accelerate away from the sun. It's going to get lower and get really quite bright in the flight deck. So I'm going to raise this blind to actually keep some of the sun out. It doesn't obstruct my view at all, but it'll stop the sun coming in and reflecting on the instruments.
Fuel transfer stopped 55%.
Thank you, Roger. So here we are at 27,000 feet. We've just got 2.5 minutes to go to the Axel point. London have just told us that we can't go to 28,000 feet because there is crossing traffic left to right. When that traffic's gone past, and in fact I can see it on our TCAS now, it's just over 1,000 feet above us, coming from left to right. I can't actually see it visually yet. Oh, I can. Just now coming out of the top of the cloud, there's a DC-10, I think it is, coming from left to right, 1,000 feet above us. When that traffic's out of our way, we'll get our supersonic climb and acceleration. We're now navigating directly from the inertial navigation system. We've been told we can use our standard track. So the inertial navigation system is now linked into the autopilot. The autopilot will now fly where the inertial navigation system tells it to go. The inertial navigation system will tell it to go to the right place, providing I give the platform the right information. Traffic we can see ahead now, going straight across in front of us, left to right. About 7 or 8 miles away and 1,000 feet above us. Once he's out of our way, air traffic control will monitor that on radar, and when they're happy that the clearance is adequate and we're happy as well, we'll start our supersonic climb and acceleration. So now we've got our acceleration and climb clearance. We've been cleared all the way up to 60,000 feet. We've just got 4 miles to go to the acceleration point, and we're going to start the procedure, and you can follow us through on it. First of all, I disengage the auto throttles, because I don't want those to fight against me when I advance the throttles. And I'm just waiting now for the correct acceleration point. We check the navigation is correct, so we know we're out over the Bristol Channel. And we do this very precisely because we're very careful not to lay our sonic boom on the ground where we shouldn't have it. It's got 1 mile to go. It's very cloudy out there at the moment, a haze. We're not going to see. Axle point now, opening the throttles back to full power. 2 afterburners, please.
2.
Roger's engaged 2 afterburners. Slight nudge as the power goes in. We start to accelerate. The other 2, please.
Selected.
The other 2 are now. All 4 afterburners are engaged. The aircraft's accelerating. And I pitch it up to actually start its climb. I'm telling the autopilot to do the pitching up process. We've got back to our maximum indicated airspeed. The Mach number is increasing. Our climb has started now. We're climbing at a good healthy rate. Little bleeps you hear are little warnings that we're getting close to our maximum speed, which is where we should be, so that's good. I'll now tell the autopilot to maintain our maximum indicated airspeed. The throttles are fully forward, the afterburners are engaged, we're climbing up through 28,700 feet, and just going through Mach 1 on my Mach meter. Les's instrumentation is just a little bit behind us at the moment. Right.
Now
Mach 1 on the co-pilot's Mach meter.
55.8 moving aft.
CFG is moving rearwards. And we're just climbing through 30,000 feet.
Up to 600. 1013, sir.
56%.
Checks it's moving aft.
Thank you.
Transparency de-ice demist.
Still off.
Mach 1 check is complete. 55.9 going aft.
Correct.
Well, we're climbing now through 31,000 feet. We're in some light hazy cloud, but we're about to come out of the top of that. Our indicated airspeed is just 400 knots, 402 in fact at the moment. But really we're flying and seeing the Mach number increase as we climb up through the flight envelope. And at the moment the Mach number is 1.05, 105. So we're just beyond the speed of sound. Now until Concorde came along, the only people who flew supersonic were in military aircraft with silver suits and big bone domes on. And it was something of a very special event. With Concorde, we've made it a very routine event, and our passengers don't really know that they're going supersonic unless we actually tell them. And or, of course, they follow the progress on those indicator panels back in the cabin. This is really the achievement of Concorde, to make supersonic flight so routine. The aerodynamic drag is at its highest just before the speed of sound, and through to Mach number about 1.4, 1.45 or so. So the extra power we're getting from the afterburners is helping us to push us through this high drag area. It's aerodynamic drag caused by the shock wave around the aircraft. Nevertheless, we are actually climbing quite healthily. We're accelerating all the while, just going through Mach number 1.1.
Secondary nozzles are good. 56.4 still going up.
Thank you, Roger. Roger, at that point, does a check of the nozzle systems on the back of the engines to confirm that they're in the right position for high-speed flight. The climb performance, especially at these speeds and altitudes, is very much dependent on the outside air temperature. Just a change of just 1 or 2 degrees at our weight can actually affect our climb performance. Today we've got a temperature outside at the moment of minus 52 degrees Celsius. That might seem very cold, but it's just about typical for this time of year and this height in the atmosphere. So we're getting quite a good average performance out of it. The next event we're looking for during the climb now is a Mach number of 1.3, because at 1.3 the intakes can no longer cope by themselves without the ramps starting to move. And 1.3 is just approaching now, and the ramps will start moving down, start choking the air as it comes in, to force it through the shock wave that they produce, and start controlling the speed of the air as it actually gets to the rotating part of the engine. Just gone through 1.3, and Roger will monitor on his instruments that the ramps are starting to move, and I can see quite clearly that they are. So we can continue to accelerate. Those ramps will now progressively move down and continue to control the airflow into the intakes.
They're all modulating.
Thank you, Roger.
1.3 check complete, 57.1 going off.
Thank you. You'll also hear that quite frequently we refer to a CFG, a percentage, usually 50 something or other, 55, 56, and Roger just said 57% going aft, which means that what he's doing is moving the field to change the centre of gravity. It's crucial to us that it's in the right place, so we include it in a lot of our regular checks, just to monitor it and make sure we know that each other is monitoring the centre of gravity position. Now we're getting towards Mach 1.4, the drag is beginning to reduce, so we get a bit better rate of climb for the same sort of rate of acceleration, all the while managing our energy as we go away from the surface. So as we get to 1.4, the drag is beginning to reduce, so we're getting a better rate of climb for the same sort of acceleration of the aircraft as well. Temperature outside is warmed up a little bit. It's now just 2 or 3 degrees warmer than it was, which means that that's going to affect our climb performance a little bit. And also, because now we're getting faster all the while, that heating on the skin is beginning to take place. The compressibility of the air is beginning to heat the skin, and friction is beginning to come in. And the temperature on the nose of the aircraft, the hottest point and where it's measured, is now plus 37 degrees Celsius, plus 37, going up all the while, plus 38 now. And that'll keep increasing as we increase our speed.
County Arnold check.
Thank you.
Going through 40 up to 60, no prime, 1013 set, 2992.
That check's 57.6 still going aft.
Cross the check.
Thank you, Roger. The flying of these, any sort of heavy and big aircraft is, of course, a team job. The crew work as an effective team if the operation is to be really successful. And Leslie's really going to concentrate on monitoring the aircraft and making sure we're going in the right direction, and that air traffic controller aware of where we are all the time. So he's doing that at the same time that I'm talking to you. Now reached a Mach number of 1.5, so 1.5 times the speed of sound. We've just gone through 40,000 feet, 40,500 feet at the moment.
Temperature's dropping off now, so we're going to do a temperature shear.
The outside air temperature has changed in just a short height there, just over a couple of thousand feet. It's changed by about 7 degrees, which has quite significantly affected our climb performance and also our rate of acceleration. It's got quite warm at the moment now. It's now 9 degrees warmer than we would anticipate at this altitude. We're also getting a little bit of light turbulence. It's caused by the shift in the wind and the shift in the temperature, which reinforces the fact that in fact we're going through some temperature layers at the moment. It's gone through 41,000 feet now. Mach number's 1.55. And the next thing we're looking for in terms of Mach number is a Mach number of 1.7, because then we've got sufficiently out of the high drag regime to actually dispense with the afterburners. We then really come into our own. The aircraft becomes unique, in that no other aircraft at the moment can continue to fly, let alone accelerate and climb supersonically without afterburner. Every other aircraft, including the military aircraft, when the afterburners are switched off, the aircraft slows down or goes down. And at the moment, the fuel we're using across the ship is 44 tons of fuel an hour. And obviously, if we carried on burning fuel at that rate, we wouldn't go very far. But when we switch the afterburners off, that fuel flow is halved and gradually gets even less as we carry on during the flight. And that's the secret of Concorde. By not needing the afterburners, by being able to switch them off, we can actually get the range out of the aircraft, which gives us the ability to fly across the Atlantic with 100 passengers on board. If we kept the afterburners on, we obviously wouldn't get even halfway there. Mach number's now gone through 1.6, 1.62, and we're climbing through 42,000 feet. But a slow rate of climb on now, so it's still quite warm, although it's getting a little cooler. The temperature at the moment is just 7 degrees above the standard atmosphere we were expecting today. The rate of climb is now around about 700 feet a minute. We've reached an indicated airspeed of 513 knots, but at this altitude, indicated airspeed is less significant, of course, than Mach number. The inertial navigation systems are actually telling the autopilot to follow their instructions to turn us slightly, so they'll bank the aircraft very slightly at the same time while we're climbing. And we're approaching a Mach number of 1.7. So the Mach number at the moment is 1.69. We're keeping our eye on that now. As we approach 1.7, I'll ask Roger to switch off the afterburners. You ready, Roger?
Yep.
It's 1.7, it's quite slow. Temperature's still quite warm, it's gone back up to +9 now. And approaching 1.7. And with this +9 degrees over a standard atmosphere, it's quite hot. 2 off, please.
2 off.
And the other 2.
They are off. AFCS.
So all the afterburners are now switched off. Mach number of 1.7. The AFCS, the Automatic Flight Control System, has now been set up for the next stage of our supersonic climb cruise. And we now continue to accelerate quite a bit slower now because the afterburners aren't producing that extra power, but we are still accelerating. So, there we are, we're now flying and accelerating at a Mach number of 1.72. It's a very slow acceleration at the moment, and in fact we've hardly got any climb on, because the outside air temperature still is about 9 degrees warmer than a standard atmosphere at this stage, so this temperature change actually makes an appreciable difference to the performance of the aircraft. Ironically, the passengers are still getting their value for money because we're still flying at a good ground speed, because while we're not accelerating quite so rapidly, the high temperature means that the speed of sound itself at this altitude, at this temperature, is quite high. So while we're a little bit slower than Mach 2, the Mach 2 itself is higher, and therefore the ground speed is very similar to what it will be when the temperature comes back and cools down a bit. In fact, in the cabin, the indicated ground speed is 1130 miles per hour, 1130 miles per hour. We, of course, up here work in knots, and you can see from this instrument here that our ground speed at the moment is 982 knots, which is 1130 miles per hour. Pretty close to approaching 1000 knots. Well, with this temperature, it's forecast to get even warmer at the moment, and in fact, as I speak, the temperature's got up to plus 10 degrees. We tend to deal in the temperature being above or below the standard atmosphere that we were expecting, and it's 10 degrees warmer than the standard atmosphere at the moment, and it's forecast to get another degree or two warmer than that. So it's going to be a very slow acceleration towards Mach 2, but all the while, we're covering the surface of the Earth at around about 20 miles a minute, and so we're actually travelling quite rapidly across the Atlantic. In fact, perhaps now would be a good time to look at the temperature gauge and the temperature information we have available to us. And I'll ask Roger to show you his temperature instrument and explain the readings that are on it.
The temperature gauge that we have back here on the flight engineer's panel is a duplicate of the one up on the pilot's panel. It shows 3 readings. The upper one, which is the total temperature, is the temperature on the nose of the aircraft, and at the moment it's plus 91 degrees centigrade. You can see written in red underneath it, TMO, that is the maximum operating temperature, and that indicates 127, so that if this total temperature gets to 127, we actually slow the aircraft down slightly to reduce the temperature. The second indication is a static temperature, and that is indicating minus 46 degrees centigrade at the moment. That is the air temperature outside of the aircraft. The lower indication, which is ISA, is indicating plus 10. At normal circumstances, we would expect that to be indicating approximately 0 at the moment, so it's now indicating plus 9. That is 9 degrees hotter than normal and is the reason for our slow acceleration.
Well, it's been a few minutes since I last spoke to you, and in that time we've been slowly climbing and accelerating all the while. We're just going through 50,000 feet at the moment and just reaching Mach 2, as you can see from the Mach meter over here. It's hovering around 1.99 and a half at Mach 2. It's still relatively warm outside. It's cooled down a little bit. The temperature is now just plus 5 degrees above the standard atmosphere. And as it gets a little bit cooler, then we get a little bit more climb performance out of the aircraft. It accelerates a little bit more rapidly. So we're just approaching Mach 2, just hovering around about 50,000 feet. Just as in a short while, we'll get to the point there where we can actually settle at Mach 2 as our cruising speed. While we've been away from you, what we've been doing is checking our flight plan and paperwork. We've been checking our fuel figures and looking at the progress of the flight, and we're anticipating arriving in New York just about on schedule, at least getting onto the approach, depending on then how busy air traffic control are, whether we actually get a landing and onto the terminal on schedule. As you can see from the Mach meter, it's trying very hard to get to Mach 2. Our ground speed at the moment is 1,310 miles an hour, 1,310 miles an hour, which is from a ground speed of 1,139 knots. 1,139 knots, 1,310 miles an hour. Mach 2, 50,000 feet. What happens at this stage is that the autopilot has been set up and primed to recognise Mach 2, and when it does, it'll settle at Mach 2 as our cruising speed. The throttles will move a little bit to stabilise the speed, gradually come back to full power again. The autopilot will stabilise a cruise climb. This means that basically what we'll do is maintain Mach 2, and as we get lighter, as we consume fuel, and obviously as the outside air temperature changes, we'll be allowed to drift up above 50,000 feet Sometimes if it gets a little bit warmer, we may drift back down again, so we may go up to 53,000 feet and drift back down again towards 52.5, then back to 53, 54. The overall trend will always be upwards, although we may go down a little bit from time to time. Now you can see from the Mach meter at the moment, just reached 2.01, just gone over Mach 2, and if we look up here to the AFCS, the autopilot panel, the autopilot is engaged in max climb, max cruise. And that's the mode that actually says, right, lock onto Mach 2, stabilise the speed, and once you've got it nice and stabilised, if you have to climb or have to go down a little bit, then do that in order to maintain that speed. And that's the logic the autopilot's going to follow. Of course, with any aircraft, the laws of aerodynamics are such that if you actually go slower, the one way to go faster is to put the power on. If you don't want to do that or haven't got the power available, then you have to go down a bit again. If you're going a bit faster, you can pull the power off, or you can point upwards and climb a little bit. And that's basically the thinking that's going to be going through the autopilot's mind.
Cruise rating, Dave?
Also just gone through 50,000 feet, so Roger's going to switch to cruise rating. Thank you, Roger. And that's a rating change on the engine, which actually moves some of the parameters by which the engines are controlled.
The transonic checklist complete.
Thank you.
You've got 58.8 and steady.
Thank you, check. So the centre of gravity position is now 58.8%. Mach number's just settling at just a little bit over Mach 2, which is fine. And we're at 50,500 feet at the moment. And we're just about settled at that height. And there'll be a balancing act now between our speed and our height, which will go on for the rest of the cruise. But overall, as I say, the trend will be upwards, and we should reach something like 57, maybe 58,000 feet before we reach the point where we have to start the deceleration down towards the United States. When we talk about actually causing our performance not to be quite as good as it would be, we're not talking about aerodynamic performance, but we're talking about the effect on the engines that warmer temperatures have. The air is less dense when the temperature is warmer at these altitudes, and so you get less air actually going into the engine. And the jet engine being a very simple process of pushing air into the front, squeezing it, lighting it and forcing it out of the back, actually requires a certain amount of air density actually to produce the exhaust gases, of course, which produce the thrust. So if the air is less dense, we actually get less thrust, less performance, and we get less acceleration and a poorer rate of climb. Temperature now is just dropping off slowly. It's now down to +3 above the standard atmosphere, so we'll be settling into a nice comfortable cruise regime. Somewhere between -3 and +3 will give us a decent Mach 2 cruise climb performance. And in fact, we're now just slipping up towards 51,000 feet, and the speed is settling at 2.01. The autopilot's gone through its thinking processes and actually says, right, it's now quite happy with this cruise configuration. It's disengaged the autothrottles, which it was helping, using to help settle the speed, just left them slightly back a bit, and I've just moved them forward, put them fully forward now, so full dry power again, no afterburners, full power on the throttles, and the power that the engine actually produces now is controlled by switch selections on Roger's panel, and he'll take you through that in a little while. So there we are, settled at 51,000 feet, Mach 2, welcome to the Twice the Speed of Sound Club. Doing 23 miles a minute, and at the moment we're some 9 miles above the Earth's surface. Looking out around us, it's a hazy horizon, as it often is in the North Atlantic most times of the year, so it's very difficult to see the curvature of the Earth. And there's some medium and low level cloud around, not too bad at all really. In fact, if this weather carries on going eastbound, we should get into the United Kingdom in the next few days. It shouldn't be too bad. The sea looks reasonably calm for the eastern side of the Atlantic. And of course we were way up above the weather here, and so we keep our radar on just as a check to look at the weather below us in case we ever had to descend. But basically we have open skies and there's no other aircraft up here with us, of course. So we'll settle back in the cruise, and all the while we're checking our flight plan progress. One of the things we're particularly looking at is our progress to see how that compares with our prophesied progress if we were to lose 1 or even 2 engines. The aircraft will fly quite comfortably on 3 engines, fly quite comfortably on 2 engines. We'll stay in the air on 1 engine, although it won't go very far. If we lose an engine, then we have to slow down. We can't maintain our supersonic speeds on 3 engines. So we're obviously interested in knowing where we are if that was to happen. If we have to slow down to supersonic speeds, then our range is nearly halved, and therefore obviously being over the ocean, we're interested in how far away we are from a suitable airfield. The chart that I have in position next to me here is a graphical presentation of our track and the distances to suitable airfields, and on it is indicated whether we can reach those airfields, whether we lose 1 engine or 2 engines. But for the meantime, That's what we're looking at keeping our eye on at the moment. And also checking our fuel state at all stages of the flight. And we do this against our planned fuel and our actual fuel on board. And Roger's reading that from his fuel computer. And we do cross-checks against that to ensure that we're going to arrive with the right amount of reserve fuel. At the moment we're going to arrive with something like 14 tonnes of fuel spare, which is enough fuel for us to divert to a number of other airfields nearby, or to hold for a while if we need to, and still land with some reserve fuel in the tanks. What I'm going to do now is ask Roger to explain to you a little bit more about this engine system. I've explained to you already that we're on full dry power, but the power that the engine actually produces is governed by a number of other selections. And I'm going to ask Roger to explain those to you now.
Dave, our skipper, has indicated to you that we can change our engine maximum ratings using switches. Our throttles are electronic, so this is actually a very easy thing to do. On our overhead panel, we have an area that looks at the engine controls. At the very front end, we have the HP valves, and they actually control the fuel into the engines. The 4 switches immediately behind them are actually the rating switches. Now, these deal with 2 ratings. One is takeoff, and the other one is flight. This one is selected to flight at the moment. On takeoff, we were using the takeoff rating, and that controls the dry rating. That's the power that is derived without the reheat from the engine. Towards the back of this panel, we have another set of switches, and they look at cruise and climb. Once the first set of switches are selected to flight, these second set of switches come into play, and we cruise with it selected to the cruise setting. That occurs at 50,000 feet, and as Dave indicated to you, it's picked up on the checklist. In normal circumstances on the North Atlantic, we actually don't have very much change to the engines. The electronic ratings within the engine controls themselves vary the maximum power as we climb. Depending on the air temperature, we can actually have a cruise rating and a climb rating at 50,000 feet that is the same. If, however, we were flying down in the Middle East or around Miami, where the upper air temperatures are very cold indeed, selecting from climb to cruise would cause all 4 engines to slow down, probably about 0.5% to 1% on our N2, which is the high-speed rotational part of the engine. On the North Atlantic, that is very rare, and today, in fact, when we made this selection, there was no change to the engine settings at all, just an electronic change within the throttle controls. On this area up here, we have a number of switches which are associated with our intercom system and our lighting system. Starting from here, this switch operates the flight deck door. The one next to it is our call button, and this allows us to attract the attention of ground engineers when we need to speak to them on the intercom. The third switch is actually to do with the intercom and allows us to couple our flight deck system into the cabin crew interphone system so that we can speak to the cabin crew through the intercom. To enable us to do this, we have to attract their attention, and this is a call button so that we can attract the attention of the cabin crew if we need to talk to them. Below that, we have 2 switches, one for the seatbelt sign and one for the no smoking sign. Both of these are activated during the flight in accordance with our checklist system. The unit here is an emergency evacuation warning system. We have to be in a position where if we need to evacuate the aircraft very quickly and we cannot communicate using the radio or the intercom with the cabin crew, we have to be able to tell them that the evacuation should go ahead. We then have some light switches, which are internal lighting within the flight deck. And below that, we have the flight control panel. It is not normally touched in flight unless there is an abnormal situation where we have to make a selection. And in that case, it would be done in accordance with the checklist that we were following. It has, as you can see, colour coding: green, yellow and blue. And they are the colour code system for our hydraulic services. There are 3 systems: a green system, a yellow system and a blue system. The yellow, which is through this knob here, is available to us as a standby system to select to replace green, or to select the other way to replace the blue system.
The since we last spoke to you, the flight's been progressing. We've now been airborne for 2 hours and 24 minutes, and we've got just a little over an hour to go to New York. We're just coming up by a longitude of 60 degrees west. And in fact, if you look down here at our inertial navigation, this is mine on my side of the aircraft, and you can see the latitude and longitude ticking over all the while. 44, 29.8 north, 59, 10.4, 6, 8, 11.6 west, and so on. Just approaching 60 degrees west. This light is now flashing, this 4 and 5, to tell us that we're approaching a point where we need to feed in some more information. In fact, the 4 and 5 is the number of one waypoint and another waypoint. We're going from waypoint 4 towards waypoint 5. The waypoints, the lat and longitude of all the waypoints, are listed on our navigation log, which we each have a copy of. So we're going from 4 to 5. What I do when we approach this waypoint and then starts to flash is to check for a start that the latitude and longitude I see in my instrument ties in with where we should be. So I have a check against the chart and against my navigation log that these figures look approximately correct, and they do. I then select waypoint number 5 on this knurled knob here, which tells me that waypoint 5 latitude and longitude is 42.46 north, 65 degrees west. And again, I check that off my navigation log, and that is the correct waypoint. So I'm happy now that we're going from 4 to 5, and 5 is the correct place. I then move the switch around one more selection, and it gives me my distance and time to this next waypoint. And it says we've got 250 miles to go, 249 miles to go. And every time one of those changes, that's another mile gone. It also says this is going to take us, at our current ground speed, 13 minutes. So 246, 12.9 minutes. I check that. And what I do to check that that is in fact correctly set is to press a hold on these two numbers, and that gives me the computer distance between 4 and 5, 235 miles, and a time of 12.3. And once again, I check that off my navigation log to confirm that the computer in the INS agrees with the paperwork, and it does. And I can release that to keep on running again. So having done that, I now know what time we were going by waypoint 4, the estimate for the time for waypoint 5, then I can write these on my log and work out an estimate for waypoint 5 and tell air traffic control. Having got this settled and happy that the inertial navigation computer is taking us in the right direction, I then move my selector back to position, so I've got a constant readout of the position that the computer thinks we are, and I can compare that with my log at any one time. The other two will be looking at track and distance and comparing the time as well. Another reason why I want the longitude as well is because I'm looking at the tactical chart that I described to you earlier, and set out on the chart by the lines of longitude are the points beyond which we can go onto another airfield or back again. And I know from looking at 60 West that my chart says that if we were to lose or to have to shut down one engine, on 3 engines we can get to New York now. In fact, if we had to shut down 2 engines, we could still get to New York. So we're getting information from the inertial navigation computer, which I can use in a tactical sense. Now this flashing means, normally this would be steady, this flashing means that the computer says I want some more information about where to go in a short while. So what I do is I press remote, which means that the information can be fed into my computer from Les's computer, because he's going to feed in the information. I needn't feed it in my own by myself, he can feed it in and it'll transfer to mine, and what I'll do when he's done it, I'll check the figures against my navigation log. And that progression is made throughout the whole flight. We monitor this inertial navigation computer to check the tracks, distances, latitude and longitudes from our navigation log, and Les, who's been doing the radio, has been passing our estimates to the air traffic control units as we've been flying. We started off across the Atlantic talking to Shannon in Southern Ireland, and now we're talking to Gander in Newfoundland. In fact, just about half an hour ago, at about 2 hours out in the flight, we flew a beam Gander in Newfoundland, and at the moment we are some 127 nautical miles away from Halifax in Nova Scotia. And Halifax will be away on our right-hand side because, of course, we're keeping out over the ocean while we're supersonic. In fact, I'm using the navigation beacon at Halifax, Nova Scotia, to update the inertial navigation computer. If you remember right at the very beginning, I called out of the database on the navigation computer some positions for some radio beacons. One of those was Halifax, and I've also tuned Halifax on my radio beacon. And the INS is now comparing where it is measuring the distance from Halifax, comparing it with the distance that it calculates should be the distance to Halifax. And if there's an error, it enables it to correct and refine the navigation systems in the inertial navigation. And that's called INS updating. And with that updating, it stops any errors increasing in the progression of the flight, then it means that our accuracy can be down to some 200 or 300 yards by the time we approach our destination. So Les at the moment is feeding in the new figures for the inertial navigation system. That stopped this light flashing, this caption, because now it's saying I've got some more information. He's quite happy with that, and in a minute I shall check those figures and make sure that the right figures have gone into my machine. And as long as we keep on doing that, the inertial navigation computer, whatever I tell it to, will tell the autopilot to fly us along these tracks. It's now 19 minutes after 8 in the morning in New York. We should be arriving there in about just a little bit less than an hour's time, so which means we'll be arriving just about an hour before we actually took off local time from Heathrow. The sun's been getting a bit lower behind us all the time because we're crossing the Atlantic at a higher speed than the sun crosses over the Earth, which means it's going back down again. So when we arrive, the sun will be about the same height in the sky as it was in London when we left, despite the fact that we've been flying for 3.5 hours. We're presently still cruising at Mach 2. In fact, it's 2.01 at the moment. Our height at the moment is 56,300 feet. We've been drifting up all the while as we got lighter. Still at full dry power, no afterburners in use. And we're heading all the while towards New York, staying off the coast as long as we can so we can maintain our high-speed supersonic cruise. We're planning to start our deceleration and descent in approximately 20 minutes. And we plan this quite carefully to make sure that we're subsonic before we have to turn in towards the United States coastline. Because of course, whenever we're supersonic, we're putting that supersonic boom on the ground. We can't do that over populated areas. And so be very careful to plan our approaches so that we go subsonic just in time. If we go subsonic too soon, then it's inefficient because we're going too slow, too soon, means we waste fuel and lose time. So getting it right, just right, is quite an art in terms of flying the descent. We've calculated some figures. We agreed a figure that we are going to start going down in, I say, in about 20 minutes' time. After we've slowed down, our traffic control will give us a series of descents and heights to reach certain points. And they'll also almost certainly pick us off and give us some radar headings as well. We're flying our standard route, and a bit later on, to fit in with their pattern. Then they'll give us some radar headings to fit in with their pattern as we approach the airport, and sequence us in for our landing. At the moment, we've been told to anticipate a landing towards the northwest. That's landing from over the ocean, crossing the coastline, landing in the northwesterly direction. It's one of our favourite runways because the British Airways terminal at Kennedy Airport is just off to the left at the end of the runway, which means we've got a very short taxi. Helps us, of course, to meet our schedule. That will be updated and quite likely changed. New York is quite well known for the fact that runways change the direction on us on the way in. They change their preference, and if the weather's a little bit misty and they choose to move the runways around and decide to land on a different runway, that might happen. But at the moment we're planning for a northwesterly arrival. So I'll get on and check the latitude and longitude figures that have been fed into the inertial navigation computer, and I'll talk to you again in a short while about some more of the flying instruments. Okay, having checked the correct tracks and distances have gone into the INS, and the waypoints are all correct. Just before we leave the INS, let me just take you around a few of the other functions you can get out of the instrument. This is the main selector switch, and by a rotary switch, by moving it round, you can display certain sorts of information. So if we start from here, this selection is called track and ground speed, and it gives us our track to a 1 decimal place, and our ground speed in knots, of course, 1146 knots. One more click round gives us our heading. There's a decimal point missing there, it's 246.4. There's a little light in the display missing. It also gives us our drift angle, the amount by which any wind is pushing us to one side or the other. And 0A means no drift. Next selection is cross track, and it's looking at the desired inertial navigation track. And with the error that's in it, it's calculating that we're 0.8 of a mile to the left of track, a nautical mile, 0.8 of a nautical mile to the left of the track that we've asked it to fly, and it'll be making corrections for that. And also the cross-track error, 2A with a dot means 2 degrees to the right, which means that it's steering 2 degrees to the right of the track we've asked it to. We should expect it to do if it says, and if it thinks we're a little bit to the left. In other words, we can see that it's making a correction to put us back on track. The position is the next selection, and I've explained that already, our constant rolling position in terms of latitude and longitude. That position, the next one, indicates the waypoint that I've got dialed in here. So if I ask it for waypoint 6, which is the next one we're going to, 5 to 6, waypoint 6, that is the latitude and longitude of waypoint 6, and that's the figure I check off my communication log. The next one round is distance and time, and that tells us the running distance to the next waypoint. So from 5 to 6, we've got 97 nautical miles to go, 96 nautical miles to waypoint 6, and that's the time at this ground speed to get there, 5 minutes to go. So we can update our ETAs at all times. The next selection gives us the instantaneous wind readout. The wind direction, 63 degrees, 063 degrees, and the speed, 53 knots. So even despite the fact we're up here at 57,000 feet, quite a fresh wind blowing up here, and that's the top end of the jet stream activities, but really sometimes does penetrate into the upper atmosphere.
226 on the fuel.
Thank you, Roger. And finally, the final selection is the desired track, and that's the track that we are requiring the inertial navigation system to fly for us, 243 degrees, and that's the track that it's trying to maintain for us. And as we saw earlier on, it says we're a little bit to the left of track, but it's making correction for it, all well within the accuracy and tolerances of the machine. And the panel on the right-hand side are just some codes that set out for us the status of the computers and how accurate they're running. And this 1-4 indicates to me that it's running at a high level of accuracy. So those are the selections that are available to us, and as you can imagine, some of them are very convenient for us, especially getting instantaneous winds and being able to assess our drift and ground speed at any time. I'll turn my mic now to the latitude and longitude of where we are, and so I can monitor that at all times and see our rolling position. Well, we need to move up now to the flight control panel in front of where I'm sat. So the first instrument we'll start with is the large instrument right in the centre top of the panel. It's the ADI, the Attitude Direction Indicator, the artificial horizon. And that's actually showing us the attitude of the aircraft relative to the horizon. The orange symbol in there represents the wings of the aircraft, with the centre dot being the nose of the aircraft. The light blue is the sky, the black is the earth, and the line between the two is the horizon. And as you can see at the moment, the aircraft is slightly left wing down, because in fact we're in a gentle turn to the left to our next position on track. Behind the orange aircraft is a white bug that I can move by moving my selector on my control column. And that gives me a datum to go for at any time I want to change my pitch. And it's like a cursor that reminds me of my attitude that I should be flying, or gives me a target attitude to fly to. And during takeoff, that's set at the predetermined attitude for departure to which I rotate the aircraft. At the moment, it's set at a figure which will give us level flight, which is just below the nose of the aircraft. There are various markings on here. It's measured in degrees up and degrees down, and the little orange dotted line at the bottom there represents the maximum pitch down attitude in supersonic flight. Around the edge of the instrument also is measured in degrees of the pointer, the amount of bank, so each of those indications measures 10 degrees, and we can measure precisely the amount of bank we put on the aircraft. On the top left-hand side, we have a warning lamp that will come on if the attitude of the aircraft is in excess of a certain figure, or if it deviates from the attitude as indicated on the co-pilot side, to remind us to compare the two and to make sure that one of them is not working correctly. And on the top right-hand side, another caption that lights up to indicate when we've reached our decision height on our instrument approaches. So there's quite a bit of information in that instrument, and we can add even more. Because when I switch in my flight director, two yellow bars appear, one horizontal and one vertical. Now the flight director is an indication of what the autopilot would do if it was in, and it is obviously at the moment, or if I'm hand flying the aircraft, what the autopilot would do to achieve certain parameters that were set for it, maybe a height, a speed or a heading. The basic idea is that if I move one of the bars that way, that is saying that you've asked me to tell you what I should do to turn left, and that way to turn right. So the aircraft will bank to make those changes and to try and comply with the way the bar has moved. And if I was hand flying the aircraft and I'd asked it to tell me what I should do to make that heading change, I would just follow the direction of the bar till it came back into the middle. Once it's in the middle, I'm now complying with the instructions. This very similar happens with the pitch bar as you ask it to change altitude or change speed. So that's the flight director system contained within that primary flying instrument. Moving down now, we come to the HSI, the Horizontal Situation Indicator, the compass system. This obviously is telling us our heading. At the moment it's a true heading because I'm working on true tracks rather than magnetic. It shows on this orange line our desired track. The little white symbol there of the cross represents the aircraft. And it shows you that we're just very slightly to the left of track, which is what we had estimated when we looked at the INS before. The triangle at the top of the instrument is our desired heading, and that can be changed by moving the heading selector above my arm. The little orange diamond at the top indicates the drift, and as we saw looking at the INS, there was no drift at the moment, so it's lined up perfectly with the heading. In fact, these captions here indicate that we're actually in a heading mode, and it's being navigated by the INS. It's number 1 INS that's navigating it. So we have again a selection of information on that instrument. Also, when we're doing an instrument approach to landing, this bar will indicate the centre line of the instrument landing system, and a symbol will come down the right hand side indicating the glide slope. And by keeping these two in the 0 position, we know we're flying a perfectly lined up approach to the runway. That information is then repeated on the instrument above, so both instruments present the same information. These little captions here, which are very difficult to see in the sunlight, perhaps if I hold my hand like that, you can see the numbers, indicate the distance to go. It's showing the same figures that were on the INS system. And on the right hand side, the current ground speed, again the same figures that were on the INS system.
4 minutes to go to diesel.
Thank you. So again, quite a lot of information on both those instruments, not very much by comparison to the modern EFIS systems, but still a lot of information and a major primary instruments for our flying of the aircraft. Now we've been given our clearance by air traffic control to start our descent. They've cleared us at the moment down to 39,000 feet. 39,000 feet is the height at which we can go subsonic, so that's fine. Gets us into the subsonic traffic pattern and we can turn in towards Kennedy. We worked out our descent point to being 50 miles before
10 miles.
Our waypoint, and we've got just, as you heard Roger say, 10 miles to go to that point. So we're now sitting now ready. We've done our descent checks and ready to start at that point our deceleration and descent. Having got this point established, it should feed us in quite nicely.
5 miles.
With a minimum delay. We've not wasted any time.
4.
We shouldn't be going slower than necessary for longer than necessary.
3.
First thing I do is tell the autopilot to maintain our height.
2.
Disconnect the auto throttles. And
1.
Hand the throttles over manually to Roger. And at 50 miles, ask him to throttle back. Thank you very much. So Roger pulls the throttles back, nice and carefully, watching his ramp and intake instruments to make sure that they all follow the movement that he's made. The autopilot is maintaining the height. We pull back part of the power and we're beginning to slow down. And as you can see from the Mach meter over here, the Mach number now is falling back off Mach 2, 1.96, 1.95. Temperature outside at the moment is 5 degrees colder now than a standard atmosphere, so the deceleration will take a little bit longer than it would do in a warm atmosphere. Exactly the opposite of the acceleration and climb. So we pull back part of our power. We don't pull all the power back because what we want to do is maintain the airflow for air conditioning and cooling purposes. But we maintain our height, 57,500 feet, and we slow down at this height for a while. This is the first stage of the deceleration. What we're looking for is an indicated airspeed over there of 350 knots. At 350 knots we actually start our descent. So as we approach 350 knots, I ask the autopilot to put us into a gentle descent. It'll start to point the nose of the aircraft down, and as we approach 350 knots, I'll then ask it to maintain 350 knots. Now at this stage we haven't moved the throttles back any further. We still need that airflow through the aircraft, but we have started to descend now. And we're descending now to about 1,000 feet a minute, and coming down through 57,200 feet. Approaching 350 knots, settling nicely down into that. I've now asked the autopilot to settle at 350 knots, and that'll be our normal descent speed. The power's still at the position it was left at when we pulled it back initially, and the Mach number now is 1.53. So as we descend down in the middle of the flight envelope at 350 knots, we watch the Mach number reduce, and when we get to a Mach number of 1.5, we can then take some more power off because the air is getting more dense, we need less air, and therefore we can keep the air conditioning going. We're also turning now inbound towards Kennedy Airport in New York. We're still far enough away not to worry about the supersonic booth, but now we started slowing down. We know we're going to be okay and clear of the land by the time we get subsonic. Mach number 1.5 approaches, and again, nice Roger to throttle back to the next stage of throttling. Now again, he doesn't bring the throttles all the way back because we want to maintain some airflow through the aircraft while we're up here in the very thin atmosphere. And now again we see the speed at around about 350 knots, and we see the Mach number decreasing all the while. So we're now descending and slowing down at the same time, and we're going to fit into a nice slot around about 39,000 feet subsonic as we come in towards the closer area towards New York Airport. In fact, before we get to 39,000 feet, we anticipate they'll give us a further descent, continued descent down below
fuel pressure on, just going into
down
the drill.
towards Kennedy Airport.
I had the drill out if you could cancel the module.
So the bong you heard was the master warning system drawing our attention to a failure on parts of one of our systems on the back of Roger's panel. He's pulled out the appropriate checklist to action that. It's not a serious warning, it's an amber warning, and he's going to deal with the checklist during our descent. Next thing we're looking for on the descent is a Mach number of 1.3 or slower, and there we have 1.28, 1.27 coming down. And that's because at this speed, again, below this speed, we no longer need those ramps to move inside the engines. And Roger's monitoring to make sure the ramps move back up into their normal subsonic position.
The ramps are up.
Thank you, Roger. Air traffic control now cleared us to descend further, down to 33,000 feet. And so we'll continue that descent and slowing down and going down all the while. Okay, we're descending now through 32,000 feet, and we've just gone through the speed of sound slowing down. The Mach number is now 0.97, and as we go through the speed of sound, plenty of air now going into the aircraft. We're not going too rapidly, and we'll close the throttles all the way now to flight idle. So if you close the throttle, please, Roger. We'll still maintain 350 knots, but now with less power, this will increase our rate of descent. Air traffic control have cleared us down to 14,000 feet. And cleared us to a point called Owens, which we're heading for, and they'll want us level somewhere around about the Owens point, and we're not far off that planned profile at the moment.
The tank pressure amber warning light is now out. The indications are normal.
Thank you very much. Well, air traffic control have just changed our clearance. They want us down quicker than they originally said. So to aid the deceleration, we're going to engage the two throttles in idle reverse. Are they armed, Roger?
Armed now. The light is on.
And engaging the inboards into idle reverse. This will increase our rate of descent quite considerably. Speed is more or less the same as it was before, but our rate of descent has at least doubled, if not more now, to 5,500 feet a minute. Altimeter has just gone through 20 for 14,000 with a prime.
Check.
53.8.
Affirmative, still coming forward.
We've been cleared down to 14,000 feet, so before we get there, around about 15,000 feet, I'll disengage these idle reversers so the aircraft can gently level out at 14,000 feet. It now seems that air traffic control don't want the same point as they wanted last time, so the idle reverse is going out. The arming mechanism has disarmed.
The light is out.
Spot on, look at that.
And we're in full normal idle forward power at the moment. And we've been cleared now down to 9,000 feet. We no longer need to rush because they've changed their clearance. And we can just reduce our rate of descent a little bit, settle back into a normal descent regime. Well, we've now leveled at 9,000 feet. Our speed is 350 knots still, and at some stage shortly we'll expect air traffic control to give us instructions to slow down a little bit more, and also I'm sure they'll be giving us radar headings to take us in towards Kennedy Airport. Kennedy Airport at the moment is some 46 nautical miles away on our right-hand side. We've been told to expect a landing on runway 31 right at Kennedy Airport, and I'll show you the chart which indicates the routing in towards it. You can see from this chart that Kennedy has a pair of parallel runways running north-west-southeast, and another pair of runways running north-east-southwest. 31 right is the right hand of the two northwesterly runways on an inbound bearing of 313 degrees. We're at the moment way down here off the coast, and we're going to be coming in under air traffic control instructions to bring us round to position on the approach path in towards the airport there. The coastline runs along here, and on our way in we'll be mostly over the ocean, and then in along down the approach to land on 31 right. And the British Airways terminal is to the northwestern end there of the runway, so it's a nice short taxi in towards our terminal and to our gates. Well, air traffic control has just given us a turn round to the right towards Kennedy Airport, so we're getting down towards the busy traffic areas. I'm going to take this screen down behind us. The sun anyway has now gone behind us, is no longer a factor, but I also want to make sure that none of the windows are obscured. Still at 9,000 feet, still flying at 350 knots, and we're heading almost due north, the heading of 4 degrees right of north at the moment. Kennedy Airport is some 36 miles away from us, straight in front of us. I don't imagine for one moment that air traffic control will give us a straight approach from here. They'll no doubt want to take us off to the right in a while to fit in with other traffic that's approaching the airport.
Speedbird Concourse 9,000 descending to 3,000 feet, and we're heading 0040 Port Kennedy.
Speedbird 1 Heavy, New York approach, roger. Reduce your airspeed to 230 and maintain 3,000.
Roger, reduce airspeed 230 knots, maintain 3,000.
Check 3 in the window.
3 checks, 230 in here.
Yep.
Nice view of Long Island on the radar.
Speedbird 1, leave your speed up. We're going to run you ahead of 747 traffic that pulled it way back. Direct Kennedy, speed up.
Air traffic control have now turned us round to a radar heading of 030, 30 degrees, and told us to descend to 2,000 feet and that we're number 1 in the traffic pattern, which is a nice change. Also asked us to keep our speed up a bit, which is also nice. At the moment we're some 30 miles away, the airfield's away on our left-hand side. But we're actually not flying towards it at the moment, we're just flying a beam it while we fit into the pattern. So I'm going to start slowing the aircraft down now into our intermediate approach speed. 111.5, that checks.
Just turn left heading 330 to call established, Speedbird 1. How's it going down?
Visor down, please.
There's going 5.
Gear down, please.
And the gear.
Altimeters, radio altimeters.
Okay, on the glide.
Check the radio altimeters are active. 3017 set both sides. The approach check complete.
Yep. Okay.
1.
91, thanks for your help.
Bye-bye.
4 greens checks on the landing gear, Dave.
4 greens checks.
Yep.
Nose is down green, brakes.
We're 7
Check normal.
Turning left heading 090. 090 for direct.
And New York departure, Bonanza 5593 Charlie out of 5.
Landing checklist is complete.
On up to 5,000, 93 Charlie. Okay. There you go.
1,000 feet radio.
Okay, 5 greens ground shooter. Kennedy Town, Speedbird, Concord 1, good morning. Finals runway 31 right, 2.5 miles.
Speedbird 1, clear land, 31 right, 1 calm.
Dead land, clear 1.
800 feet.
And you're stable.
400 feet. 300 feet.
100 above.
Polar at 281, 31 left, clear for takeoff.
200 feet.
Here we go.
This side.
Heavy County Tower, 31 left, taxi to position, home. 31 left into position.
100 feet.
Target 655, contact New York departure 135.
50, 40, 30, 20, 15.
Stick forward, please.
Stick forward. $100 knots. 75 knots. 50, 40, 20 knots.
Thank you.
Speedbird Kennedy from the 1.
Nose to 5, please.
Concord 1,
2 and 3 off, roger, when you're ready.
2 Victor for gate 2.
Gate 2 check. Gate 2.
Thank you.
Speedbird Concord 1 with clear 31.
Speedbird 1, MK, taxi to ramp.
Speedbird 1.
Master warning.
Evident.
Nose is 5. Flight control inverters.
Welcome to Kennedy Airport. We've just turned left off runway 31 right. The British Airways terminal is just ahead of us. Very short taxi, and as I said earlier,
American DC-10 from the right at Zulu.
really quite a hazy day here at the moment. Quite warm, quite poor visibility at the moment.
2 and 3, Dave.
Yes, please, Roger.
Going now.
We're just turning in off the taxiway in towards the terminal area. We've been told to park on gate 2 at our terminal. We've just been airborne for 3 hours and 20 minutes when we touched down. So we should be on the gate here well ahead of schedule. Visor up. Brakes are set to park. Chop time of 1-2.
Lights transparencies.
Okay, they're all off.